I've been driving trucks for almost 15 years now, and I've seen things that would make most people swear off the open road forever. Long stretches of empty highway, broken down rest stops in the middle of nowhere, and the kind of darkness that feels like it's watching you back. But what happened one night outside of Wichita, Kansas, still keeps me up whenever I'm parked too long under fluorescent lights. It was early December, bone cold and quiet. I'd been hauling a refrigerated trailer full of meat to Denver. The heater in the cab worked, but the wind still found a way to crawl through every crack in the frame. By midnight, I'd been driving nearly 11 hours straight. I needed caffeine, a bathroom, and a smoke. When I saw the flickering sign for an all-night rest stop about 5 miles ahead, I pulled off without hesitation. The place looked dead when I rolled in. One other truck was parked along the far edge, engine off, no lights. The convenience store had a dim glow inside, but it looked empty too. I cut my engine, grabbed my thermos, and stepped out into the freezing air. It was the kind of silence that feels too perfect, like the world's holding its breath. Inside, the building smelled like stale coffee and wet mop. A radio played softly behind the counter, but there was no cashier. I called out a quick, "Hello?" and waited. Nothing. The bathroom was in the back, next to a vending machine with half its bulbs burned out. When I pushed open the door, it creaked like something ancient. The air was damp, cold. The mirror above the sinks was cracked from one corner, a spider web of fractures running through the reflection. I splashed water on my face and stared at myself for a second. My eyes looked tired, hollow, the kind of look you get after too many miles and too little rest. That's when I noticed something strange. In the reflection behind me, the stall door closest to the wall was slightly open. But when I turned around, it wasn't. All the stalls were shut tight. I frowned, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. The reflection still showed it open, just an inch or two. But the real one wasn't. A trick of light, I thought. Or maybe my brain was fried from the long drive. Still, I stepped closer, trying to figure out the angle. The cracked mirror distorted the image a bit, but there was no mistaking it. In the reflection, I could see a shadow, something tall standing just behind that open stall door. I turned again. Nothing. A chill crawled up my neck. I was about to leave when the door behind me creaked. The heavy, slow kind of creak that metal hinges make when they've been still too long. I froze. The air seemed to thicken, like the room was holding its breath. Then, faintly, I heard it. The sound of boots scuffing the floor inside one of the stalls. I told myself it was another trucker, maybe sleeping off too much caffeine or booze. But something felt off. The sound wasn't right. Each step was deliberate, scraping just enough to let me know it was there. "Hey," I called, my voice sounding way braver than I felt. "You okay in there?" Silence. Then, from the mirror, I saw movement again. Not in real life, in the reflection. That same stall door was open now, wider than before, and something was standing there. It was a man, I think, but his proportions looked wrong. Too tall, too thin. His shoulders seemed to slope down in an unnatural way, like he'd been folded to fit inside a space too small for him. His head tilted to one side, slowly, curiously, and I saw his face just enough to wish I hadn't. It wasn't fully visible, more like a pale blur in the cracked reflection, but his mouth, it stretched wider than it should have. I spun around, ready to confront him, but the stalls were all closed again. Every single one. I backed toward the door. My hands were shaking now. When I reached for the handle, the radio outside suddenly went static. A sharp burst of white noise echoed down the hallway. And then faintly, someone whispered. I couldn't tell where it came from, whether from inside the bathroom or the static, but it was right behind my ear when I heard it. "Don't look away." My whole body went rigid. I turned just enough to see the mirror again. He was closer now, right behind me. I didn't think. I just bolted. The bathroom door slammed against the wall as I burst through it, sprinting past the empty counter, my boots echoing off the tiles. Outside, my breath came out in clouds. The air felt colder, heavier, like it was pressing down on me. I jumped into my cab, slammed the lock, and started the engine. The other truck parked across the lot was still there, dark and silent. But now I saw something in its windshield, like a faint reflection. Someone standing in front of it, just barely lit by the truck stop lights. I shifted into gear and peeled out, gravel spraying under my tires. I didn't stop until I hit the next gas station 30 miles down. When I looked in my rearview mirror, the road behind me was empty, completely empty. But for the rest of that night, every time I passed another reflective surface, the side mirror, the window, even my phone screen, I swore I saw movement in it. Just faint, just for a second, like something tall and pale was following, staying just out of sight. I told myself I was just tired, that the long hours, the caffeine, and the darkness had all blurred together into some kind of waking nightmare. But that voice, the one that whispered, "Dawn, it'd look away," kept circling in my mind like a vulture. By the time I reached the next truck stop, the clock read 3:17 a.m. It was a bigger place, well lit, with a few rigs parked outside and the buzz of fluorescent lights cutting through the night. I parked close to the entrance this time. I wanted people nearby. I needed noise. Inside, the smell of hot food and diesel felt almost comforting. I grabbed a booth near the window, ordered a coffee, and tried to steady my hands. The waitress, an older woman with a kind smile, asked if I was okay. I told her I'd just had a long haul. She nodded knowingly. I didn't tell her about the man in the mirror. After half an hour, I started to feel almost normal again. I even laughed to myself about how paranoid I'd been. Mirrors don't move, shadows don't follow you, and whispers, just imagination. At least that's what I told myself, until I looked out the window. Across the parking lot, in the reflection of the glass, I saw something standing between two trucks, a tall silhouette, still, watching. I turned to look directly, but nothing was there. The space was empty, just asphalt and steam rising from exhaust pipes. But in the reflection, the figure hadn't moved. My throat went dry. I blinked hard, looked again, and it was gone. That's when I noticed the waitress staring at me from the counter. "You okay, honey?" she asked again. I tried to smile, but she frowned. "You look pale. Maybe you should get some sleep." Yeah, sleep. That's what I needed. I paid, left a tip, and went back to my truck. The cab was freezing, but it felt safe. Familiar. I locked the doors, leaned back in the seat, and pulled a blanket over myself. Sleep came in waves. Every few minutes, I'd jolt awake, sure I'd heard something. Footsteps outside, whispering wind, the sound of a mirror cracking. But each time, it was just silence. Then, at some point deep in the night, I woke up and realized I could see my reflection in the passenger side mirror, only it wasn't moving with me. When I turned my head, the reflection didn't. It was still staring straight ahead. I froze completely, eyes locked on that reflection. My chest tightened as a slow smile spread across its face. Mine, but not mine. "Don't look away." The whisper came again, low and breathy, but this time it came from inside the cab. I turned my head slowly toward the passenger seat. For a split second, there was someone sitting there, pale skin, black eyes, a stretched grin, then nothing. Just an empty seat. I started the truck immediately. My pulse was pounding, my fingers shaking on the steering wheel. I drove without even checking my route, just needing to move, needing distance between me and whatever that thing was. But no matter how many miles I put behind me, it felt like he was still there, lurking in every reflection. At one point, I passed a semi going the other direction, and as its headlights flashed by, I caught a glimpse in its mirrored surface, that same figure, standing behind me in my sleeper cab. I almost ran off the road. I didn't stop until sunrise. When I finally did, I parked at a rest area packed with families and RVs. The sunlight felt alien after such a long night, but it gave me comfort. Monsters don't come out in daylight, right? I stepped out, stretched, and walked toward the restroom. I stopped halfway when I caught my reflection in the side of a chrome trailer. For once it looked normal. No cracks, no shadows, no one behind me. I laughed nervously and whispered, "You're losing it, man." That's when someone spoke right next to my ear. "I told you not to look away." I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. No one. Just a couple of tourists walking in the opposite direction, not even looking at me. The chrome reflection had changed. Now the version of me staring back wasn't moving again. Its eyes were sunken, its skin pale like wax. And behind it, behind me, that same tall man was standing, one hand on my shoulder. I stumbled backward and nearly fell. The reflection flickered, then returned to normal. By that point, I'd had enough. I called my dispatcher, told him I was sick, and pulled into a motel nearby to sleep off whatever was happening to me. The room was small but clean. A single mirror hung above the dresser, and the first thing I did was cover it with a towel. I left the TV on low for background noise and collapsed onto the bed. At some point, I must have drifted off, because when I woke up, the towel had fallen to the floor, and the mirror was uncovered. Only, it wasn't showing my reflection. The man from the rest stop was standing there instead. He was closer this time, so close I could see the veins under his skin, the way his mouth stretched into something that looked like a grin, but wasn't. His eyes were black, wet, endless. And then, slowly, he raised his hand, and I felt something cold brush against my neck. I stumbled backward, knocking the lamp off the nightstand. The light flickered, and when it came back on, he was gone. But the mirror wasn't empty anymore. In it, I was still standing there, frozen, eyes wide, mouth open. Except I wasn't moving. I was staring back at myself, and that reflection, my reflection, smiled. I've been a long-haul trucker for nearly 12 years, and in that time I've seen my fair share of strange things on the road. Deer that appear out of nowhere, lights that vanish when you get close, people walking along deserted highways in the middle of the night. But nothing prepared me for what happened on Route 41 last winter. It was late, close to 2:30 in the morning. I'd been driving through northern Illinois, headed toward Milwaukee. Snow was starting to fall hard, the kind that looks like static in your headlights. The road was empty, just me and miles of flat darkness stretching in every direction. I'd been listening to an old horror podcast to keep myself awake when I saw her. A woman standing on the shoulder of the highway, wearing a long, light blue coat. At first I thought I was imagining it. Nobody in their right mind would be out walking in that kind of weather. But she was real. She stood completely still, facing away from the road, her hair whipping around in the wind. I slowed down instinctively. Something in me said, "Don't stop." But another part, the human part, couldn't just leave her out there. When I pulled over, she didn't move. I leaned over, opened the passenger door a little, and called out, "Hey, you okay out there?" Nothing. I stepped down from the cab, the snow crunching under my boots. My breath fogged in front of me. The woman still hadn't turned around. She was maybe 50 feet ahead now, just past the guardrail, her coat almost glowing under my headlights. "Ma'am," I tried again, louder this time. "You need a ride? It's freezing out here." Slowly, she turned her head, not her body, just her head, and looked at me. Her face was pale, almost gray, like she hadn't seen the sun in weeks. Her eyes met mine, and I swear to God, I felt every hair on my arms stand up. There was no expression, just emptiness. She said one word. "Cold." I took a step closer, but before I could say anything, she turned back toward the woods that bordered the highway and walked straight into them. No flashlight, no path, just vanished into the dark. I stood there for a minute, completely frozen. Part of me wanted to follow her, to make sure she was okay. But the other part of me, the smarter part, told me to get back in the truck and go. So that's what I did. I got back into the cab, locked the doors, and pulled back onto the road. But even as I drove, I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see that blue coat walking along the shoulder again. About 10 miles later, I started to calm down. I told myself she probably lived nearby, maybe took a shortcut home. It wasn't my business. Then I glanced at my passenger seat. It was wet. Just a small dark patch on the fabric, like melted snow. But it hadn't been there before. I looked around the cab, confused. The doors were still locked. The windows were up. That's when I caught a whiff of something faint, like wet earth and old perfume. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was probably just from my boots. But the longer I drove, the stronger it got. By the time I reached the next rest area, the smell was overwhelming. I pulled in, turned on the dome light, and checked the seat again. The wet spot was gone. But now, there were footprints, small, bare footprints, leading from the seat to the passenger door. I froze, staring at them. The prints looked fresh, like someone had just stepped out. And the passenger door handle was covered in condensation, like someone had been breathing on it from the inside. I got out, slammed the door, and circled the truck with my flashlight. Nothing. No one. Just snow falling in thick, silent sheets. I waited a few minutes before climbing back in. The smell had faded, but not completely. It lingered like a warning. I kept driving. Hours passed. The sun still hadn't come up, and I was counting down the miles until dawn. Then, out of nowhere, the radio cut to static. I smacked the dash, thinking it was just interference. But through the static, a voice came through. Soft, faint, but definitely a woman's. Cold. I nearly jumped out of my seat. My heart was hammering as I turned off the radio completely. Silence. I drove faster, trying not to think, just focused on the road. My headlights caught something up ahead, a shape in the distance, moving slowly on the shoulder. No, it couldn't be. But as I got closer, I saw the same light blue coat, the same woman. Only this time, she was facing me. Her eyes glowed faintly in the light, and her face was twisted into something unnatural, mouth stretched wide like she was screaming, but no sound came out. I swerved to avoid her, tires screeching on the snow. My truck fishtailed before slamming to a stop sideways on the shoulder. My chest was heaving, hands gripping the wheel. When I looked back, she was gone. No tracks in the snow, no sign she'd ever been there. I sat there for what felt like forever, the engine idling, steam rising into the frozen air. Then I reached for my phone and called Highway Patrol, told them there was someone walking near Route 41. They said they'd send a car. Before hanging up, the officer on the line paused. "You said she was wearing a blue coat?" "Yeah," I said, still shaking. There was silence. Then he said quietly, "We've gotten that call before, same description, every winter for the past 20 years. I didn't respond. Just sat there, staring into the rearview mirror, praying I wouldn't see that coat again. After that night, I couldn't have stopped thinking about what the officer said. We've gotten that call before. Those words replayed in my head over and over during the next few days on the road. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself I'd been tired, maybe even half asleep, but deep down I knew that wasn't the case. I'd seen her. I'd smelled her perfume. I'd seen those footprints. I called the dispatch office 2 days later, told them I needed a break from night driving. The guy on the phone laughed it off. "You finally starting to believe those truck stop ghost stories, huh?" I didn't answer. Instead, I parked my rig outside a diner off Route 12 and sat in the corner booth, nursing a coffee while scrolling through local news archives. I typed in, "Route 41 accident, blue coat, woman found dead." And then I found it. A newspaper article from 2003. The headline read, "Local woman killed in Route 41 crash, driver flees scene." Her name was Lena Carter, 27 years old. The article said she'd been hit while walking home after her car broke down in a snowstorm. The driver was never found. I stared at her picture for a long time. Same coat, same pale face, same cold, distant eyes. I didn't know what to do with that information. It wasn't like I could tell anyone who'd believe me. So I tried to move on, but Route 41 seemed to find me no matter where I went. Every job, every new route, somehow I'd end up near it. One evening, maybe 2 weeks later, I stopped for fuel at a small truck stop outside Racine. It was one of those old, almost forgotten places. Flickering sign, one pump still working, vending machines older than me. Inside, the cashier was a quiet older guy, wearing a worn-out Green Bay cap. He looked up as I paid and said, "You're driving north tonight?" "Yeah," I said. "Route 41. He stopped counting my change. "Don't stop for anyone on that road," he said, eyes dead serious. "Not even if they look hurt." My skin prickled. "You mean the woman?" He nodded slowly. "You saw her." I didn't know what to say. He leaned on the counter, voice low. "She appears every few years, always during the first snow. Truckers say she's trying to find the driver who hit her. Some say she climbs into their trucks and makes them see things." I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. My hands were trembling slightly, and the warmth of the diner suddenly felt thin and cold. Before I left, the man added one more thing. "If you see her again, don't look in the mirrors." That last line sat heavy in my head as I got back into my rig. It was near midnight when I reached Route 41 again. The snow was light this time, just flurries. I had the radio off, every sense alert. For the first hour, nothing happened. Just empty road and the hum of the engine. I started to think maybe it was over. Maybe I'd imagined everything. Then, just as I passed mile marker 128, the temperature in the cab dropped. Fast. My breath came out in visible clouds. The windshield fogged at the corners. Then I smelled it again. That same faint perfume, like lilacs, mixed with damp earth. "No," I muttered under my breath, gripping the wheel tighter. The passenger seat creaked. I glanced sideways. Nothing there. But the rearview mirror, something moved in it. A shape. It was faint, like a reflection that didn't belong. A woman's silhouette sitting in the sleeper area, her head tilted down, her hair covering her face. I remembered what the cashier had said. "Don't look in the mirrors." But it's human nature, isn't it? You have to look. When I glanced back again, she was closer, sitting upright now, her head slowly turning toward me. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded across the snowy road, tires screaming before coming to a stop. When I turned fully around, the sleeper area was empty. I was breathing hard, sweat cold on my neck. I needed air. I opened the door and stepped out into the snow. The night was still, dead silent. Then I heard it. Footsteps, crunching in the snow. They were circling the truck, slow, deliberate. I climbed back into the cab, locked the door, and turned the ignition. Headlights flashed across the road, and that's when I saw her again, standing directly in front of the truck. Her coat was torn now, her skin a bluish gray. Her lips were moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. I hit the horn. Nothing. I blinked, and she was gone. When I looked down, there was frost forming on the inside of the windshield, spreading from the passenger side toward me. Words began to appear in the frost, forming one shaky line of text. "Why didn't you stop?" My stomach dropped. "I did," I yelled instinctively. "I did stop." But deep down, I knew she wasn't talking about me. I pressed the pedal and drove like hell until I hit a populated stretch of highway again. I didn't stop until sunrise. When I finally parked at a rest area and looked at the truck, the passenger side window was cracked, the outline of a hand still frozen on the glass. That was the last time I ever drove Route 41. I transferred to a regional route the following month, stuck to daylight shifts, and tried to forget. But every year when the snow starts to fall and the air gets that same sharp bite, I think of her. And sometimes, late at night, when the road ahead is empty and the radio fades into static, I swear I hear her voice again, soft, almost pleading, cold. I've been driving trucks for almost 12 years now, long enough to see things most people wouldn't believe if I told them. Long enough to stop questioning what's real and what's just the road messing with your head. But what happened last winter on Interstate 90, that was different. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't sleep deprivation. It was something that shouldn't exist. I was hauling a load of frozen goods from Montana to Illinois, a route I'd done a dozen times. It was mid-December, and a storm warning had gone out earlier that night. I figured I'd make it a few more miles before pulling over. By midnight, visibility was garbage. The snow was coming down hard, and even with my high beams on, I could barely see past the hood. The GPS was lagging, showing my position flickering back and forth like I was stuck between two places. That's when I saw the sign. Rest stop, 1 mile. It didn't look familiar, but I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was one of those small dot rest areas you never notice unless you need one. I slowed down, took the exit, and rolled into the parking lot. Everything seemed off. The lights were dim, those old yellow sodium lamps that buzz like they're dying. The snow here was thinner, almost like the storm was avoiding the area. There were 2 other trucks parked near the edge, both covered in a thin sheet of frost. No movement. No sound. The rest stop building was small, just a single brick structure with 2 bathrooms and a few vending machines glowing faintly inside. I stepped out of my rig, my boots crunching on the snow, and headed for the building. The air was still. No wind, no sound except the faint hum of the vending machines inside. When I pushed open the door, a wave of warm air hit me, but it smelled strange. Like old coffee and something faintly metallic. There was a man sitting at one of the tables near the wall. He looked like a trucker too. Heavy jacket, cap pulled low, coffee cup in hand. He didn't move when I came in, just stared into his cup. "Rough night, huh?" I said, trying to sound casual. He slowly turned his head toward me. His eyes looked glassy, almost unfocused. "Storm's bad," he muttered. "Don't go back out yet." I nodded and went to the vending machine. I dropped in some coins and pressed for coffee. The cup fell, but the liquid that poured out was dark, too dark, almost black. It smelled burnt. I took a sip anyway, bitter, stale. I turned back toward the man. He hadn't moved, still staring into his own cup. "You waiting out the storm too?" I asked. He didn't answer, just blinked slowly and turned his gaze toward the window. I followed his line of sight and froze. Outside, under the dim yellow light, there was another truck. It hadn't been there when I arrived. The headlights were off, but I could see movement in the cab. Someone sitting in the driver's seat. I tried to convince myself another driver must have just pulled in quietly, but something felt wrong. The snow outside was undisturbed, no tire tracks. My chest tightened. "Hey, you see that?" I asked, turning to the man again. But the chair he was sitting in was empty. The coffee cup sat there, still steaming. I felt my pulse in my throat. I turned in a slow circle, checking every corner. Nobody. I was alone. The air suddenly went cold, not like a draft, but like the heat had been sucked out of the room. The lights flickered, buzzing louder. From outside came the sound of an engine turning over. I looked through the glass door again. The truck outside had its headlights on now, blinding white in the snow. I could see the faint outline of a figure in the driver's seat, sitting perfectly still. I backed away from the window, my breathing fast. I told myself it was fine, just another driver. But when I blinked, the truck was gone. No sound, no tracks, just empty snow. The lights inside the building flickered again, dimmed to almost nothing, and then the vending machines began to glitch, the digital numbers flickering through random symbols. 88888, then 410. I stepped back, ready to bolt. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not outside, inside the bathroom. Slow, wet, like boots dragging through water. I didn't want to check, but every part of me screamed that I had to make sure I wasn't imagining it. I crept toward the bathroom door. The flickering light above cast jittery shadows on the tile. I reached for the handle, pushed it open. Empty. The mirror above the sink was fogged, like someone had just taken a shower in there. And written into the condensation were 3 words: "You were here." I stepped back, heart pounding. My reflection looked wrong, darker, like I was standing under a shadow that didn't exist in the room. I bolted. Out the door, across the lot, up into my truck. I turned the key and floored it, tires spinning in the snow. I didn't care which direction I went, just away. When I hit the main highway again, the GPS freaked out. The map spun, flashing random numbers before finally freezing. The weirdest part? When I passed the next mile marker, it read 131. There's no exit between 128 and 132 on I-90. That rest stop doesn't exist. When I stopped the next morning at a known station, I asked a couple other truckers if they'd ever seen a rest area around there. Every one of them said the same thing. There was no rest stop in that stretch. And yet, when I checked my side mirror before heading out again, there was a thin smear on the glass, like a handprint, frozen solid. After that night, I tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion, a long drive, too much caffeine, not enough sleep. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. You can't dream up details that clear. You can't imagine smells, or the feeling of that cold handprint on your window. I parked in a proper rest stop later that morning, the kind with cameras, attendants, and a dozen other drivers coming and going. I stayed there for hours, too wired to sleep. Around 3 p.m., I finally drifted off in the cab. That's when the nightmares started. I was back at that same rest stop. The flickering yellow lights, the smell of burnt coffee, the man staring into his cup. Except this time, when I tried to leave, the door wouldn't open. The man lifted his head. His face was wrong, stretched, his eyes too wide, his smile too long. "You came back," he whispered. I jolted awake, gasping. My clock said I'd only been asleep for 10 minutes. And yet, my windshield was fogged from the inside. There was another handprint, this time on the passenger window. I didn't stay another second. For the next week, I couldn't stop thinking about that rest stop. I even tried finding it again on the map, just to prove it didn't exist. But something strange happened. Whenever I zoomed in on that stretch of highway, my GPS app would crash. Every single time. One night, out of morbid curiosity, I asked on a truckers forum if anyone had ever seen a phantom rest stop on I-90. Most people joked about it. One guy said, "Yeah, that's called hallucinating, buddy." But one message stood out. It was from a user named Iron Ghost. He wrote, "You're not the first. Don't stop at any rest area that isn't listed on your atlas. The one near marker 131. It's not for the living." He attached a photo. It was grainy and dark, but I recognized the shape of the building. The same flickering lights, the same crooked sign. The timestamp on the image was from 2012. The message disappeared 10 minutes later. When I tried to click his profile, it was gone. After that, I started having this feeling every time I drove through remote stretches, like someone was watching from behind the trees, or pacing along the edge of the light from my headlights. A week later, the storm warnings came again. I was rerouted back through the same area. I didn't want to, but dispatch said it was the only clear path east. By the time I hit that section of I-90, my palms were sweating on the wheel. My eyes darted between the mile markers, 127, 128, 129. When I saw 130 coming up, I felt my throat tighten. "Just keep going," I whispered to myself. "Don't take any exits." But then the GPS glitched again, just like last time. The screen flickered and zoomed in by itself. "Rest stop ahead, 1 mile. "No," I muttered. "Not again." I pressed the gas, pushing to get past that area. But when I looked up, the exit ramp was already there. I swear I didn't turn the wheel. The truck just started drifting toward it, like something else was guiding it. I tried braking, but the pedal went soft, like I was pressing into nothing. I shouted, "No!" and yanked the wheel, but it was too late. The tires slid over the snow, and suddenly I was back in that same parking lot. Same flickering lamps, same eerie quiet. The two frost-covered trucks were still there, in the exact same positions as before. Every instinct screamed at me to drive off, but my hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys. Then I saw movement. One of the truck doors opened. A figure climbed out. It was the man from before. Same heavy jacket, same cap. He walked toward my cab, slow and deliberate, like his legs were stiff. I locked the doors, heart pounding. He stopped right in front of my window, his breath fogging the glass. And then he smiled. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. It stretched too far, like his skin was being pulled from the inside. He leaned closer, and through the glass, I could make out his voice, muffled, but unmistakable. "You left your coffee." The glass between us froze over instantly, a white spiderweb of ice spreading outward from where his face was. I fumbled for the ignition. The engine finally roared, and I threw it in reverse. The man didn't move. He just stood there, watching as I tore out of the lot. Once I hit the highway again, I didn't stop for anything. I didn't eat, didn't rest, I just drove. When I finally made it to the next way station, I stumbled out, shaking. I told the officer on duty what happened. Everything. He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "Son, that stretch was closed 5 years ago. They tore that rest stop down after a trucker froze to death there in 2010. I stared at him, thinking he was joking. But he wasn't smiling. He turned his monitor toward me and showed an old record. The name of the driver, the date, and a photo. It was him. The man I'd seen, the one who told me not to go back out. When I looked at the photo again, I noticed something else. The truck behind him in that picture. Same model, same color, same company logo. My company's logo, mine. That S when it hit me. The rest stop hadn't appeared for me by accident. It appeared for me next. I've been driving long-haul trucks for almost 15 years, and in that time, I've seen just about everything. Wrecks, snowstorms, even people walking the highway in the middle of the night. But there's one thing I can't explain. One I don't talk about often. It happened 3 years ago, on a route through the Nevada desert, a stretch of Highway 50 they call the loneliest road in America. That nickname doesn't do it justice. You can drive for hours out there and never see another set of headlights. No towns, no gas stations, just sand, silence, and a horizon that never seems to move. I'd picked up a refrigerated shipment out of Reno that was headed to Salt Lake. It was late, close to 11 p.m., but I preferred night driving. The air's cooler, the roads are quiet, and the miles slip by easier. That night, though, something felt off the moment I hit the open highway. There's a strange silence out there, like even the wind doesn't want to disturb the place. My radio started cutting out, static 1 minute, silence the next. My GPS froze on a blank screen. The dashboard clock flickered. I remember thinking, great, another electrical issue. But then I saw her, a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. She was barefoot, wearing what looked like a white dress, not the flowing kind, but torn, frayed at the edges. Her hair hung loose over her face, tangled by the wind. At first I thought maybe she'd been in an accident. I slowed down, ready to pull over and help. But when my headlights hit her full on, she turned her head, not her body, just her head, and looked right at me. Her eyes glowed white, not like a reflection, not like when an animal's eyes catch the light, but bright, like something inside her was shining out. I slammed the brakes and skidded to a stop. For a moment she was gone. Then I saw her again, standing right in the middle of the road, 30 feet ahead. I honked, shouted, "Hey, you okay?" But she didn't move. I inched forward, my headlights washing over her again. And that's when I noticed her feet. They weren't touching the ground. She was hovering just an inch or two above the asphalt. I froze, staring, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Then, as suddenly as she'd appeared, she turned and started walking, straight into the desert. No light, no road, just empty darkness. I sat there for a long minute, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the lights, a mirage. But then I smelled something, faint, like burnt rubber mixed with perfume, sweet but wrong. When I looked down at my dash, the digital clock had stopped at 11:11. I pressed my foot on the gas and took off. For the next few miles, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was behind me. Every time I glanced at the side mirrors, I saw flickers of movement, a shadow darting across the road, or a figure at the edge of my headlights. Then, my radio crackled to life. At first, it was just static. Then a faint voice came through, a woman's voice, whispering something I couldn't quite make out. It sounded like, "You shouldn't have stopped." I turned the volume down, but the whisper kept getting louder, not from the radio anymore, but from inside the cab. I glanced at the passenger seat, empty, but the air felt heavy, colder. I could see my breath in front of me. Then something moved in the reflection of the windshield, a pale face in the passenger side window, hair hanging down, eyes glowing faintly. I nearly swerved off the road. When I turned, there was nothing there. I pulled over, slammed the truck into park, and jumped out, breathing hard. The desert was dead quiet. No cars, no wind, just the crunch of gravel under my boots. I walked a few steps from the truck, scanning the area with my flashlight. The beam cut through the dark. Sand, rocks, nothing else. Then I turned back to the cab and froze. There were handprints on the inside of the windshield. Dozens of them. Small, smeared, pressed against the glass like someone had been clawing to get out. I ran to the door and yanked it open, half expecting someone to be sitting inside, but the cab was empty. The smell of perfume was stronger now. I sat there for a long time, engine idling, trying to calm down. Finally, I told myself I'd keep driving until I hit Ely, a small town about an hour away. I just needed to make it there, get some rest, and forget this ever happened. But 15 minutes later, I saw movement again. In the rearview mirror, a faint figure walking down the middle of the highway, her white dress glowing softly in my taillights. I pressed the gas harder. The faster I went, the closer she seemed to get. Her face didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me with those glowing eyes. At 80 miles per hour, she was still there. Then my radio came alive again, this time crystal clear. Her voice. "You shouldn't have left me." The lights on my dashboard flickered, and suddenly the whole truck shut off. The engine, the lights, everything. I was surrounded by absolute black. When I tried to restart, nothing happened. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks came from the side window. I turned my head and saw her, inches from the glass. Her face was pale, skin cracked like dried porcelain. Her eyes, still glowing, locked on mine. She mouthed something. I couldn't hear it at first. Then, louder, whispering through the cold air, "It's time to stop." I froze. The woman's cracked lips were moving, but the sound didn't match the motion. It was like the whisper reached me from somewhere behind her voice, an echo trapped between frequencies. My hand hovered over the ignition key, trembling. I twisted it again, desperate, but the truck only made a dry, clicking sound. Dead. The air inside the cab grew heavier, almost thick. I could hear the faint rattle of the loose chain that hung near the mirror, shaking by itself. My breath fogged the glass. And then, slowly, she began pressing her hand against the window. Her skin left a faint frost print on the glass. It wasn't the kind of cold that came from the night air. This was deeper, like the cold of a freezer that had been left open too long. I whispered, "What do you want?" Her head tilted, jerky and unnatural. Her eyes dimmed slightly. no longer blinding white, but dull, milky. "You left me, in the dark." The voice came again, but this time it wasn't in my ears, it was inside my head. I stumbled back, slamming into the driver's side door, fumbling for the handle. When I looked up again, she was gone. Just gone. The road outside was empty again, stretching endlessly under the starlight. For a few seconds, I sat there paralyzed, the only sound my heartbeat echoing inside the cab. Then the dashboard lights flickered, once, twice, and the truck roared back to life, headlights flooding the black desert. I didn't think. I just hit the gas and took off, tires spinning, dust rising behind me. But the relief didn't last. 10 miles down the road, I passed a wooden sign that made my stomach drop. "Welcome to Coldwell, population 0. There was no town called Coldwell on any map I'd ever seen. The letters on the sign were old, faded. The post leaned sideways, half-eaten by rust. And then I saw something moving ahead, flickering in and out of my headlights. It was another truck, an old Peterbilt, dark green with a silver trailer, parked diagonally across the road. Its hazard lights were blinking faintly. I slowed down, trying to see if the driver needed help. When I pulled alongside it, I noticed the cab door was wide open. The headlights were still on, the engine idling. But there was no one inside. I got out slowly, the gravel crunching under my boots, and called out, "Hello? You all right?" No answer. I climbed up the side step and looked into the cab. The driver's seat was empty, except for a logbook sitting open. On the page, written in a shaky hand, were the words, "She walks the loneliest road." Below that, smeared across the page, was a single fingerprint, dark red. I turned around fast, flashlight shaking in my hand, scanning the darkness. That S when I saw something glinting in the sand a few yards away. A piece of glass. It wasn't glass. It was a windshield fragment, with a small, perfect handprint on it. I started backing toward my truck, muttering to myself, "No, no, no." And then the radio came alive again, crackling static. Then that same voice. "You shouldn't have stopped." The sound grew louder, distorting, filling the whole cab as I climbed back in. The air inside smelled like perfume and burnt rubber again. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel. I shifted into drive and pressed the gas. The road stretched out ahead, but no matter how far I went, I kept passing the same sign. "Welcome to Coldwell, population 0. Over and over. The GPS was dead. My clock still read 11:11. My phone screen flickered between black and static. And then, headlights appeared behind me. A single pair, growing closer, brighter. For the first time that night, I felt a small wave of relief. Another driver. Maybe I wasn't alone. I slowed down slightly, hoping to flag them. But when I looked in the mirror, I realized something was wrong. The truck behind me wasn't following at a normal distance. It was matching every move I made. If I slowed, it slowed. If I sped up, it did too. I flicked on my right blinker to pull over. The other truck's lights blinked at the same moment, perfectly in sync. Then the lights began to flicker. Not the steady pulse of headlights, but a strobe, like a heartbeat. I rolled down my window, leaned out and shouted, "Who the hell are you?" That's when I saw her. She was standing on the hood of the truck behind me, barefoot, her white dress whipping in the wind, her face expressionless, those eyes still glowing faintly. I slammed my foot on the pedal, trying to outrun her, but every time I looked back, she was still there. Same distance, same stare. Then, a deafening bang. My windshield cracked from the inside. I screamed and jerked the wheel, the rig fishtailing as the whole truck shook violently. When I finally got control and came to a stop, my headlights illuminated something on the road ahead. It was a truck wreck. My truck wreck. Same color, same license plate. The cab twisted and burning in the middle of the asphalt. I stumbled out, heart hammering, unable to breathe. I could feel the heat from the flames on my face, but it didn't make sense. I was standing right there, alive, unhurt, staring at my own wreckage. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, barefoot. The whisper returned, soft and close enough to feel against my ear. It's time to stop driving. Everything went black. I woke up hours later in a hospital room in Ely. A state trooper stood at the door. He told me I'd been found unconscious on the side of Highway 50, my truck perfectly parked on the shoulder, engine still running. No crash, no fire, no other vehicle. They found me clutching my steering wheel, muttering the same word over and over. Coldwell. He said there's no such place. But a week later, I checked my dashcam footage. Right at 11:11 p.m., there was a faint white shape in the middle of the road. And just before the camera cut out, a woman's voice whispered, "You shouldn't have stopped."